Peace. You're now tuned in live to Super Heru Radio. I am your host, Aseer the Dugateers, along with everybody, all the human families of the planet Earth. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you for everybody that checked in for us last week. I hope all was well. I hope everybody has been as well as they can be in these trying times that we find ourselves in. But just know that the great and beneficial and wonderful, abundant Creator is still here, and it still is manifesting in us and all of us, regardless of whether or not we feel like it is or not. Because I can tell you, past couple of days, I haven't really been feeling like things are, well, things are always changing, but I just have been really looking at things in terms of, when is this thing going to become to a point where people decide what they want to do, to stop trying to fence it and then point fingers at the same time, We're at this auspicious time in history when all of these great things is going down and all these wonderful truths about us are being revealed every day, but it seems that the only thing that we can seem to focus on is, how bad and what our situation or how dire it always is. And unfortunately, that's the thing about, society or black, quote-unquote, society, is that it's living, and it's always been in a perpetual state of having to bounce back from some auspicious act or something that happened that required our people or whoever was happening to rise above it and get over it. While it seems like these people who ritualistically raise their children not only to be racist, but to, do all the crazy stuff that we see these other nations doing, and yet it still seems like my nation is, well, not my nation, but those people who were melanated and born of this landmass seem like that's the only thing that they know how to do. And so, in sometimes little fits of melancholy will sometimes reveal aspects of that to you that you don't really, understand. And in researching some of these things, I was talking to somebody about Native Americans and stuff, and researched and was looking at when that term started to be present, in this hemisphere, and who was purporting it. And what I found was that Native American, the term or the word, was specifically something that was brought up during a period of time they call the 1500s, which, again, predominantly, most of the 1500s, whether people want to accept it or not, was dominated by the Morisco and so-called Franciscan Empire, being that they were the ones who were the spearhead in dispossessing the Moors from their property and stuff. These were the ones who felt it necessary to perpetuate themselves in a way that would allow them to hold on to things for as long as they can, which is what any ruling power does. But with the Moriscos and specifically the Catholics and stuff, it was a deep needed obsession with possessing anything that we had. You know what I'm saying? That's what you could see in the play Othello. With Iago, and how obsessed Iago was with just destroying, what remnants Othello could have had for his own happiness with Desdemona. But in essence, it was key to Othello, because what people don't realize in that story was that he was actually the general of Cyprus. He actually worked against his own people to possess Cyprus on behalf and with the Morisco Venetians. You know what I'm saying? So in a sense, he was kind of a traitor to the greater empire, but he was doing himself. So even though he was Christian under a Catholic power, he was still traveling and existing in Moorish habits. So, it's the same thing with us in that context as well. We exist in our perpetual Moorish habit, but at the same time, it's very hard for us to reestablish that in a traditional context based upon how disconnected the rest of our people are from who and what they are. So it's interesting. I was looking up this thing called, and I found that there was a convention of law applicable to surnames and forenames, and that it was a convention that took place in Munich on September 5th, 1980. And this international document basically said that surnames and forenames of a person shall be determined by the law and state for which he or she is a national. For this purpose exclusively, the situations on which surnames and forenames depend shall be assessed in accordance with the law of that state. But the wisdom provision says, in the case of a change of nationality, the law of the state of the new nationality shall apply. The United States signed off on this agreement internationally to deal with international things like that and remedies of people who are changing their names or correcting their appellation status. Therefore, that's showing proof right there that whenever the case of nationality is brought into and a change of name, it falls under the nationality and the name of the person of which nationality or name that they are going under or to. So in our case, that represents a formal government that, for whatever reason, has had a hell of a time reconstituting itself. Thank you, babe. But that's how I go, you know. Let's see.
You know what you're doing. You're not going to close anything out. You keep minimizing, opening and minimizing. I'm sure you're trying to just get stuff to people.
Yeah.
You want to do more when you're on here.
Yeah, I hear you. There's another explanation of what we're going and what we're talking about in that case. The explanation is very simple. Now, this is coming from the context of ecclesiastical law being applicable to one's own status in terms of what one consists or persists to be oneself. If you do not possess your name, then you do not possess yourself. Therefore, if the name is being possessed by a trustor or by a trustee acting as a trustor, that is fraud, and that is also a state. There's an actual term for that, estate rating by third party proxy. So the explanation, it says, is very simple. When somebody gives his name to another, he is simply authorizing that person to sign or speak in his name. That is the overall meaning of the Bible expression in 1 Kings 21, verse 8. Also in Esther 3:12 and in 8th verse between 8th chapter, 8th to 10th verse, and Luke between 10th and 17th. So the principle of delegating a name to another authorizes someone to speak or sign in that person's name, thus granting the authority to his agent and hence a part of the glory of the delegator. For example, God placed his name on his people, right, in Acts 15:14. Those names were the ancient names of Bayat El or Bayat El, right? So this means that Bay and Il were the names that God had decreed upon the chosen people of Israel, meaning those who were descendant of Israel, a.k.a. Yaqub, who were descendants of those 12 tribes that came out of the triple stage darkness that we call the Great Flood and destruction of the old world into the ancient times of what people today call Atlantis, which at the time, like I said, was anything north in a region they was also referred to as Aparika. Aparika also was called Apar, right? But it was also called Opak, right? I also think this is where the term epoch comes from, meaning a specific type of age that has gone from one state to another. Therefore, when accepting God's name, you are accepting God's nationality. Therefore, according to the Bible, God's nationality is that of the Bayat Il, which is, again, the Bay and the Il. This is why when you see so-called Jews, they always use the term El or Emmanuel. They always make a dash after, because they have adopted or walked themselves into being our undertakers because we have forsaken the Sabbath. Sabbath coming from a term Shabbat. Shabbat also coming from a term Shabbos, and Shabbat coming from a term Shabazz. So the original Shabbat Shalom, or the people of peace, was the tribe of Shabazz. So when we say Shabbat Shalom, we're actually saying Shabazz is peace. Also, because the tribe of Shabazz was of the tribe of Koresh. Also called the quarter Aish, right? Based upon them being more Aish people, today we refer to it in English as more Ish. Right? So all ecclesiastical law in Scripture is basically a state law, right? It's all being practiced in the form of representing the true and living estate. The true and living estate only becomes compromised when it is abandoned. It is abandoned when one takes upon a separate nationality that is not his own, or when one marries a nationality that historically has had no estate. So what would those be? Who would that apply to? Well, if you go by modern context, that would apply to us, right? Well, not us, but those of us who are undeclared and have not chosen who and what vine and fig tree they choose to stand under. It was just brought up in court that chick Paula Dean, the chick that actually brought her to court, was actually a Caucasian woman. And the Caucasian woman was bringing her to court for racism. So what the judge did was that the judge ruled that Paula Dean could not be racist to white people, or that the woman had no case because the woman herself was white. So what this then means is that white people cannot sue other white people for being racist. So by the same delegation, that would mean then that black people cannot sue other black people for being racist or racial discrimination. Therefore, the grounds that Paula Dean would have to be tried on or brought out would be the discrimination against one's nationality. See, you could see discriminating against one nationality then brings international treaties and stuff into play. Interesting thing that was put out, Clarence Thomas, who's they say is always sleeping on the bench or at least acting like that, but that's Steven, that's Django and Steven acting like he crippled. You know what I mean? So Thomas acting like he don't have no real sense, right? But remember, everybody calling him a sellout. Speaking to a noble today, he was like, yeah, well he basically brought it in context is that you can't call, if you call this dude a sellout, then you got to call people like Wanda Sykes and Angela Davis sellouts too, because they married to white women. So if being a sellout now, or the basis of that is being married to a Caucasian woman, you know what I'm saying, that's very flimsy nowadays, because nowadays our people are running away from their nationality so much, they're willing to be anything else. Therefore, you see the opposite happening in Caucasian people in terms of how a lot of their societal norms are being spread, meaning that whenever you're dealing with race, like they'd rather you call them a devil than call them a racist. You know what I'm saying? Because calling a Caucasian person a racist would mean that they are somehow, in their mind, you basically comparing them to the Klan or something. Now, this don't mean a lot of their family members and stuff like that ain't come from that era, which they did. But for whatever reason, being called that today is an anathema to them, right? But what he said was interesting. He wound up waking up on a bench. The whole subject was about gun control, and what he basically said was when they were talking about the right to bear arms, he just woke up and started going on a little diatribe. And he basically said, and I quote, referring to the disarmament of blacks during the post-Reconstruction era, Clarence Thomas wrote, it was the duty of the white citizen patrols to search Negro houses and other suspected places for firearms. If they found any firearms, the patrols were to take the offending slave to the free black offending slave or free black to the nearest justice of the peace, whereupon he would be severely punished. Go back in your room. And the torture of the opinion, right? Well, let me read it again. I'm sorry. Referring to the disarming of blacks during the post-Reconstruction era, Thomas wrote, "It was the duty of the white citizen patrols to search Negro houses and other suspected places for firearms. If they found any firearms, the patrols were to take the offending slave or free black to the nearest justice of the peace, whereupon he would be severely punished. Never again," Thomas says. In a scorcher of an opinion that reads like a mix of Black History lesson and Black Panther Party manifesto, he goes on to say militias such as the Ku Klux Klan, Knights of the White Camellia, the White Brotherhood, the Pale Faces, and the 76 Association spread terror among blacks. Using firearms for self-defense was often the only way for citizens to protect themselves from mob violence. You know what I'm saying? So like I said, man, sometimes even the most quote-unquote sell-outest nigga will be the one to just have a flashback and remember his days in the projects or something and go ham on these white people and shake them up. It ain't going to necessarily change a lot, you know what I'm saying? But the thing about gun control is this. There's no way they're going to be able to take guns just from black people. They're not going to be able to do it because they're actually people in play, governmental things that's already set up for in the case they do that, certain other parts of the government come online. See, that's the other part of the situation that they're scared of as well when they talk about their little New World Order thing. There's factions within factions within factions of their so-called government. And most of these things are bonded with these so-called fraternal organizations, whether people want to believe the extent of them or not. And some of them are very, very cryptic in nature, but some of them only come online and activated when aspects of this country go so awry that the only way that they can preserve themselves is by producing different ways of warfare against the current government itself. This is within its own government. This is what's called the shadow cabinet. And within this shadow cabinet, who knows is in it? But the point is, this is what happens within empires as they begin the twilight. You know what I'm saying? Whenever empires begin the twilight, they begin to go through instances where they create secret police and all that type of stuff. Same way the Nazis did, same way so-called Romans did at the time that Khan and them came, Attila and them came, took everything. It's the same situation. So the declaration or becoming a national, one's own original government, meaning the government that exists still in the world and is accessed via the Board Science Temple, is one of the only ways for one to safeguard themselves against the situation, unless you declare nationality from some other foreign power. You know, like if you're not going to claim Moorish nationality, cool, do that, but don't do that if that's what you want to do. But claim something, man. Get a Ghanaian passport or some country that got their own thing popping that happens to be melanated. Even if you may not agree with all of their politics, have something, because the United States has already listed all of its so-called property as hostiles within the field based upon the United States Battleground Act. And all of these false flag situations going down, this dude killing his wife, posting it on Facebook, you know what I'm saying? Other day, a young brother, blessed to death, Israel Ramirez, great young brother. He's a skater around here with the little skating crew they got. He was ruthlessly, basically ran down and murdered by the police, you know. And right down the block from where my son takes Taekwondo, you know what I'm saying? That's how close these things be sometimes. And, you know, and seeing how the people rallied behind, they all got together. They was banging F the police, and they was going in, man. They went in on the police, man, to the point where they backed them down, you know what I'm saying? But again, these are people with no knowledge of self. They think that they, you know, whatever they are in terms of being Spanish, as if that is an actual nationality, is not. But they rallying behind each other where it is, because at least they have a language that they rallying behind, you know what I'm saying? And this is, like I said, not even a month or 2 months after the whole Trayvon verdict. So this thing is a perpetual thing. The contempt for the original man in this country is beyond compare, beyond reproach. You know what I'm saying? And I think a lot of times if our brothers and sisters wasn't supporting it the way that they do, we would be in a position where we'd have to support each other. solely ourselves. Like, how is it that the Chinese community can have little Chinatown and all of that for themselves and rock and have their own police force and all of that other stuff, and they still exist within the so-called American culture so much to the point where you could be a person in Chinatown and never have to learn English. And never have to learn English and none of that. You know what I'm saying? Because you're so immersed in your culture that they don't even have to leave. Now, this ain't mean that they still ain't enslaving their people. Charging them exorbitant fees, putting them in containers and tanks and dumpsters and shit and bringing them over here on boats. But they doing that to their own people, and they've created an economy where even their government support that. Even aspects of the United States government support that. So when you talk about human rights, they'll laugh at you. But when I peeped that Paula Dean verdict, I really seen how they really work and how I was building with another elder, and he was saying, once you get right in terms of your nationality, the only person that can really mess with you is another Moor. And that makes so much sense when it looks to all of the things that we've been striving to do to unify. We've been in this thing for 100 years, man. Formally, as a Moorish Science Temple. 100 years. We in the 8th month of the 100-year centennial. And there'll be different, Jubilee situations going down, but the overall agenda has still not been set. Ever since the man founded it and set it up for what it is, it still hasn't been taken to the level of which we can, and we the ones in this generation with all the knowledge. We the ones with all the knowledge and the insight on how to flip it, yet we still can't consistently agree whether or not sovereignty is a relevant aspect of Moorish science, or whether we should be dealing with law in any form or fashion, meaning that you could just be a Moor and then, you know what I mean, if anything happens, you get locked up or whatever, they treat you the way that they would treat a Muslim locked up. It's a different way, because you don't see Hindus locked up like that. You know what I'm saying? You don't see people of that nature in that type of habit locked up. You don't see a lot of Asian niggas locked up in jail and general population, all of that. Majority of people you see is the people that they've seized without a state. So if Clarence Thomas can see that and he married to a white woman, why wouldn't you do the nonsense so like that? Something wrong with you. Like, you're not doing the knowledge. Like you somehow, like something's wrong with you if you don't agree that certain things just can't stand. For instance. You get into an aspect of the estate, like what we were talking about. Everything that the United States has been pushing since the time that it's been doing what it's doing has been based on the law of necessity. That law of necessity has created a perpetual grantor, false grantor trust that is enacted by people being listed as preferred stocks. Therefore, the same bonds and stocks that they travel and market on that is based on the equity. Equity is that system of justice which was developed in and administered by the High Court of the Chancery, right? So this automatically is bringing in England into the mix. So if any time England is brought into it, remember, in 1774 there was no United States of America, so any deal that England had with the Barbary powers or whatever was an agreement that they had with the Alamatacanos, meaning us over here. You know what I'm saying? So equity is really based on a guy named Towkinson's proposition that some words have a legal meaning very unlike their ordinary ones. You see? This is the beginning of them starting to switch everything up into the legalese. Therefore, the equity that was put into turning you from a Negro was getting you to give up your free national name. That name, after taking the aspect of it that was connected to the ancient precept, was then now put into a cestui constructive trust for a naturally dead person that had to pay the debt back for those Caucasian people who fled from the colonies and the plantations in the New England, in England, which at the time was the 13 colonies. Therefore, the true tenets of liberty, justice, and all that other type of stuff is based upon how it is you wound in the position you are, and how the ritualistic games were created to perpetually put you in that system. So, again, for the layman, or those considering the craft means a trick, or to make over a period of time. So it's still about taking something and transforming it from its original state into something else. But that something else may not be the best state. A lot of the situations, think about this, a lot of situations that you went through as a child, growing up, now that you see, you would do totally different if you knew what you knew now rather than you knew then. But you had to not know then in order to value what you know now. Therefore, if you knew it then, you would know the things that you know now. You see? That's a quantum redundancy, or what is called like Occam, what they call Occam's razor, you know. So ritualistically, they create all these different little fake toy names for you in different societies and different historical books and cultures to always throw you off from the fact that you're reading about yourself. And in a world where everybody's in on a joke but you can see why so many of our people seem crazy. It's not that if being black was just being black, where you could just have your nationality and get some money and not be discriminated against and all of that, the way that it seems that it is, nobody would have a problem with this shit. I wouldn't. But it just so happens is that based on the laws of equity, like I said, because of people like Tallington, they created a system to perpetually put me in a disadvantage by listing me as some sort of property and getting me to believe that. So the very inference of me identifying myself with what I think my culture is the very same thing that is killing me and my culture. The only viable means of it is the physical expression of it in the manifestation of whether or not it makes money for the general populace. I could be a cultural rapper, you know what I mean, to an extent. I could be a cultural NBA player, football player, whatever, to an extent. But the overall system and the agenda is the same. Hiram Abiff is the high ram. The ram represents Aries. The high represents sky, Aries being the top. Therefore, the top, or Hiram Abiff, then is Aseer resurrected. Both are the symbols of the mortgage, meaning the dead pledge, because Aseer, the myth of Aseer, as well as the Hiram Abiff ritual, was all based upon a dead man, or the pledge of a dead man, being in the fact that he would not give up the secret to the ruffians. The Moors then are the true inheritors of the Amarok, meaning America, because their estates were abandoned and put beyond the sea. The Holy See, or the Vatican See, meaning the Cestui Trust, or the Sea Cestui Trust of 1666, the Mark of the Beast, or the Year of the Beast. Right? So part of the aspect of we trust was that one had to be absent of themselves. Therefore, if you're absent of yourself, you have abandoned your original station. Therefore, you're not that. Therefore, you have to be something else. You are what we say you are. And because you believed them when they was bringing you into their country, you believed that was true. But we perceive country today as being in a whole different part of the world, when you can be in the same country but be occupied by different countries here in the United States. Meaning you can be a United States citizen or a national. Being a national means that you're part of the original national government. That's why being a Moorish American national is being a true man. Because everything is in the name, or what they name it. So even though Shakespeare said a rose is a rose by any other name, it smells just as sweet. You still don't go around calling a rose a daisy. So the grammatical laws that were entwined into the creation of this so-called United States was the same thing. You know what I'm saying? The certificate is, well, how do we do it? All descendants, how they flip it is that all descendants of Adam are Caucasian, right? But remember, the term Caucasian means Caucasus Asian, meaning a group of Asians or of Asiatics that were sequestered or apart from everybody else, meaning the moiety. The moiety would be the other half of the entirety. So the moiety in our instance would be the Ills and the Bays. But it's tricky because if you understand Caucasian to mean somebody that is what we perceive a white person, you see, then you are under the illusion then that you don't have an estate if you was to read this. This is why clarification and all of that can't be superfluous. Right? Also, Caucasian could mean cursed Asians, or cursed Asiatics, meaning those who lost their denationalization or who were put beyond themselves. Asian, of course, is Asiatic or Aish, right? Meaning king or queen. The Moorish Science Temple then is a vast estate trust. You see what I'm saying? So when we get into the Circle 7 Quran, where it talks about the descendants of Noah, who were the original inhabitants of the continent we call Africa, all descendants of Noah then were Caucasian because they were the ones who survived the deluge and came out of all of that existed up until that time. But a so-called African woman, meaning somebody that was put under a denationalized Moabitess, right, a daughter of Ruth who is now denationalized, was then used to help children, right? After the Africans adopted the Jesuit-influenced aspects of the religion of Islam, due to the agreements that were made during the Crusades, the last Crusades, at which Salah ad-Din separated the Templar order and created what they call the fork in the road, which basically meant that the real Templars were the ones that were trying to go back into Mohammedanism and find their way back over here. The fake ones was in it for glory and sexual conquest. So they created the Baphomet thing as a ritualistic false door for Muhammad. So those Templars that went into the satanic aspect of it and doing that to this day were the ones who fell in the deviant nature and were denied the true keys to Islam, to our Islam. The ones that didn't, these were the descendants of Hugh de Payon, also known as Hugh of the Pagans, who again was a Moor, who dealt with sexual amalgamation among the Christian slaves, and then having babies with them, and then raising their sons up, and then marrying them off to other white women Christian slaves, to then produce a so-called white race that would allow them to rule, because that was the trait of some of the European Moors. To break they relatives or whatever, instead of attacking them openly themselves, they after a while started to use the slaves and raise them up and create regiments to have the slaves prove themselves to them. And then when they won, they would allow the slaves to come in the family. But eventually, that just led to the blue stop. But they can't deny that, so to this day, they still call their royalty the black nobility. But they make you think black mean like satanic and torture, when really that's the false door. But the fact that there's factions among them, that's why you got white Shriners in the first place. They're there to tell you what the black ones either don't know or forgot. But the state governments are in rebellion against the federal government right now. So the federal government is trying to do all these things to mandate a compliance with all of them, but they all basically in pre-seceding states. That's why every other week we hear about Texas trying to secede. So when the Moabite queen was reduced to African, right, those descendants of Noah, the original Canaanites, who are the original Atlanteans, Phoenicians, Etruscans, Minoans, Carthaginians, ancient Romans, Macedonians, if I didn't say that, all the ancient Peloponnesian peoples, as well as the Peloponnesian peoples, right? All of these were the descendants of Noah. All of these then had the original estates. But once the denationalization stuff started to come in, and the African words started to come in, a abandoned estate across the board started happening. This was during the time, like I said, of Hammurabi Bey, during the rise of the Islamic Babylonian religious mystery system. That's why all of these ancient cities and places like that just seem to just disappear overnight, because the peoples that were there, based on forced migration as well as catastrophe and war, all were then displaced. These were the original tribes of Israel, again, the tribes that were infected with the Yaqub syndrome in the year 8,400, that were roaming the wilderness for 40 to 400 years. You know what I'm saying? But in that era, where in our time period it's 836 BC, and in their time period, this is between 836 BC to about 1196 BC. In their time period, this is consistent with the years of 1416 to 1776, which is the direct decline of the Societas Republicae y el Americanos Estados. The distance between these two time periods, when you add them up or whatever, is about 580 years. This is the 500 years or 400 to 500 years of slavery and intermittent conflict that's also spoken of, right? Because we know that chattel slavery that started from 1779 and ended in 1865 unofficially manifested then that 85 years as well. So on one hand, we have 85 years of chattel slavery, and then between the differential between the ancient Moorish calendar and the Gregorian calendar, we have a differential of 580 years, which again is the number 5 and 8, which again busts down to 13, which is knowledge, understanding, all being born to your culture, freedom, freeing your dome out of the false history, also coined by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad as the 85% dumb, deaf, and blind. The 85% meaning the 85% of the masses that's out here today, of our people, 85% representing the 85 years of chattel slavery that was imposed on them, that made them then believe through reconstructional history that there's something other than themselves to abandon their states. And the 580 years between that, which represents the time difference and the calendar breaking between our ancient calendar and people and what we perceived as the original time or natural law or natural time into this new fake Gregorian system that has to redistribute itself every 365 and a quarter years. This is where you get the leap years and all that other stuff, because you've got to account for this 580 years. They've only given you 365 days. But back in our time period, we told time by the moon. You see? Which is why we use the crescent and the star. Because out of darkness comes the light. Therefore, darkness moves faster than light, because light has to escape it. So once these estates were abandoned, they were then forfeit and fell under the jurisdiction of the United States. And then through the Cestui Trust, we're convinced then that these estates are not ours, because we are calling ourselves other names like African and whatever. You see what I'm saying? So it all fits in nicely into a nice big bow. But based on even their own state records, the only people they really didn't have jurisdiction over were true Moors, Hindus, and Asians. Thus, the war to destabilize any nations that were affiliated with the old Moroccan Empire to help keep us perpetually in the state that we're in is going on. And all of this is based on money. But the money, remember, they print that. It's not just that. It's about controlling the vast estate that we call Earth, that was betrothed and bequeathed to us specifically. And everybody has their version of it, and everybody has saying that they are people from it and all of that. So if I just add my voice to the fact that it was our people, what difference do it really make? If everybody else can lay claim that they had it from all this time immemorial, but then all of the ancient pictures of these people they talk about look just like me and other black people here in America, then what I'm supposed to look at it as? So because all descendants of Noah are Caucasian, that is why you have the term free white people, and Caucasians could never be free white people. Because their original designation was W-I-G-H-T, white, which means like a ghost or an apparition, meaning at one time they were incorporeal here. They had no station, therefore a station had to be prepared for them, as everything that exists in physical matter has to have a purpose and something to do. So the same way you got the white blood cells in your body getting rid of all of the stuff that you don't need and the extra stuff or whatever, the same way you externalized that and created a version that manifests and does the same thing. Only thing is doing it with people. Your own people and our own people who are dumb, deaf, and blind to who and what they really are and what their original station is. The Social Security account actually created the slave number for those people who had abandoned their estates or cannot have an estate, like anyone born or descended from a Moor, a true Caucasian, or what they would call a true Aryan. You see what I'm saying? This is where the whole thing starts germinating into one big mesh, because now you start to see that a lot of this Grand Dragon and clan stuff they're doing is really derivatives of your science work against you. So because the Catholic Church claimed all the people of the Third World as descendants of the slaves, the original slaves of the Moors, who were now denationalized and made Moriscos and Christians and stuff, which meant that their estates now belonged to the Vicar of Christ at the time, who was the Pope, as well as the Jesuit Order of the Society of Jesus, that had followed these Moors from the halls of Granada all the way over here to Grenada and the empire in the south, which was ruled by the last emperor before Noble Ali, who was Montezuma of the Temuancan Empire, of the Olmec Maya, Aztec, Inca. in that, the birth certificate is actually proof of the estate when used properly. When used in the negative or denied, it becomes an abandoned estate that is in access by the United States under the term property improvements under UCC 1. Being homeless means that you occupy no corporate residence. You see? Meaning that you are not in business with them. So they create vagrancy laws to get people who are not within their corporate jurisdiction to get off of any lands that are corporately sanctioned. You see? So as I'm showing you, every law that really existed natural, they've created an antithesis, anti-law, to exist in that. Let's see. Oh, yeah, if anybody wants to call in, you can call in at 347-637-1184. Okay. Yeah, so in that, this is why the prophet said don't give away your Bibles, because the Bible is actually, Scripture is actually ecclesiastical estate law, or ecclesiastical trust estate law that is mandated by you, and when used by you in your true title, means that you are acting as the person you are subject of. So in that, we are all subjects of the true and living God, right? So that means then that we are that when we are speaking that name. Therefore, when you write the prophet's name and put him into play, into what it is you're doing, you are accessing the divine part of the national movement, which is sometimes, or a lot of times, neglected. When that's the part that we actually have. But what I've understood is that a lot of modern Moors like the conventional means of warfare with this beast in terms of jurisdictional trivialities, meaning that they like to engage with them sometimes to test their chops, which is cool, but the goal is to get it all done by the mail if possible. So by the time they actually physically see you, you've been so enamored and hyped up that they just need to get you up out of there. You know what I'm saying? So at times when it's legal, for example, God placed his name on his people, like I said, in Numbers 6:27 and Acts 15:14, right? That is, he authorized them to speak and act in his name. At times when this legal covenant or power of attorney to make decisions in his name becomes permanent, the name is considered not on, but in the empowered agent. Understand? However, the legal sharing of authority between the delegator and his agent can sometimes become blurred, meaning between who is exhibiting the power and how that power is being wielded by the person wielding it. Okay, we got a call. 678 on Super Heru Radio.
Peace.
Peace.
Peace, more.
Peace,
I really
man.
appreciate your show, man. You really be dropping it. Some of it goes over my head, but then when I go back and look at the sources, you be right on point. I did have a question for you more if you have some time. That stuff you're talking about, the name, is real powerful, and it takes me back to that verse in the Bible. I can't quote it directly, but it talks about how, you know, if my people are called by my name, so forth, and, you know, if they humble themselves, God will heal the land. And I believe that you also was reading that part from Acts and how it was saying how God put his name on his people. So I think that's what that's the whole part when the prophet basically that's what's going to give us the entry to give us freedom. But I think we have a lot of misconceptions about how we use that name. For instance, me and my wife became married, so the legal form that you have to go through is somebody got to fill out some application, go through court, put this stuff in the record, and then go down to the DMV, change this, file that. You know what I mean? Now, I guess what I don't see, like in the temples and other places, is how we really demonstrate, like you should be able to use your name just point blank. But if you operate in these, different contracts, you're not going to be recognized unless you got their paperwork in their system. In our system, the way we operate, that's fine. You are who you are. You are who you say you are until you're proven otherwise. But when you have to deal with that beast, that's the problem. And if you could just kind of elaborate on maybe some options, and also if you can give me that book that you were just quoting from just a few minutes ago, so I can do further research and I can listen offline, brother.
Okay, peace, King. Well, this is where having like a temple and a sheep, like think about it. How do Jehovah's Witness get around and work in society and stuff with no birth certificate if they don't have no birthday? You know what I'm saying? Who's cashing in on those estates if they don't have that? Like, think about that. The person that is controlling that is probably the person at the head of the religion, because once they sign up to the religion and all of that, they basically fall under the protection and jurisdiction of whatever ecclesiastical trust that religion has set up for itself. Therefore, they've abandoned their own estate and now have had Jehovah's Witness take over that estate to the point where they have admonished their original estate, which was the name that was on their birth certificate, whether or not they know that or not, right? So that's an example of what happens when you don't use it, somebody else does. But there are privileges to some who do that, like citizens of the United States, who, for whatever reason, go through situations where they have their marriages or whatever else validated by the United States court, because you're told that's the only way you can do it. But then if that's the case, then how do, like, Hindu people and Indian people, you know what I mean? Yeah, some of them go down, but then, like, they relatives and stuff, they didn't do that. You know what I'm saying? Like the ones that just came over from India, how they still acknowledge as being married if America only acknowledges its own citizens. It doesn't. America acknowledges who it wants to acknowledge. But if you have your own so-called religious structure at play, then you can have your own ceremony and then record that yourself, or have your temple, have it recorded in your temple, and that works, if not better, than having the United States do it. So, for example, let's say if you have a baby, and then, at the time when the baby's born, the first thing they do is pull out the paper to stamp the baby foot and all of that. Well, if you already have your Moorish baptismal certificate on deck, at the same time they doing that, they doing yours. Yours will supersede the birth certificate, because now from the door you're giving the baby the free national eel or bay at the end of their name, which means you ain't got to go back and correct it later. But then at the same token, you have the original certificate, meaning that the baby was born originally into the Moorally temple first. You see what I'm saying? Of which then the birth certificate is then established as evidence of the estate in the commercial world. But because that estate has eel or bay at the end of it, it is now connected to the free national or national estate that already exists. That we know.
That's even despite them setting up that straw man through the birth certificate.
Yeah, the birth certificate, the straw man. The beauty in that would be that the straw man itself, right, is no longer a straw man because you added the free national name to it from the door. But at the same time, instead of just relying on the birth certificate, you actually have a Moorish certificate of baptismal from as soon as the baby came out. So at the same time, they created their aspect of it for you that they think they can control. They don't. because you have the binding aspect of it, the ecclesiastical aspect of it that you came with. You see what I'm saying? To do yourself for your child.
Okay.
And ecclesiastical law always supersedes commercial law, because then if they try to say, oh, well, that's not valid, then you're trying to deny the estate that's already evidenced in their birth certificate with the same name on it.
Right. Okay.
Which means that this baby's a more. You can't, you know what I'm saying? You can't flip it. Same thing with the marriage thing. You can get married by a sheikh at the temple, create the marriage certificate from that. The sheikh then files it at the temple and then files it in the county recorder for you. That's the same thing.
Right. Yeah. See, that's I think the way you explained it makes perfect sense. I just think we need to. I'm gonna help try to educate as many people I can about that whole situation, because people just don't see. They don't see where to go with it. There's no
outreach.
To the point where,
that's what I'm saying. Nobody is talking about it, like I said, in plain talk.
Right. And wasn't there a registry or a vital registry that the Moors did a long time ago? I'm not.
Yeah, they registered
I remember
with the
hearing
Selective
something.
Service.
Okay.
Yeah, it was Dingo Ill. He registered with the Selective Service and created the. He was the first Moor to officially declare that he wasn't a Negro in the United States since the old times, and it's been recorded there ever since. But nobody went and followed up on that. That was then taken over, or that aspect of it was then taken over by the resurrected Moorish Science Temple. But not everybody rocked with them like that. You know what I'm saying?
Okay. But
so
I mean,
you still got the distraction.
Is it still valid the way it is?
Oh, it's still there.
Remember, okay. Because I remember in the Catholic Church, in their Bibles, they put in the front of it, they have the genealogy of your family, your name, and you get married. Everything goes in that book. That was the way everything was recorded before they had, license.
Before they had birth certificates after 1933, because of what the Prophet pulled down on them, where they had to stop to register their citizens as property because they had no money to pay back the vast estate loan based upon the Prophet telling them that they had to get up out of here. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Okay.
So, it all busts down to the same situation. What happened in 28 led to what happened in 33, and what happened in 33 led to 45. What happened in 45 led to 56. What happened in 56 led to 65. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then it went on and on.
It's a dirty little secret of the hidden histories that go on. We don't quite understand, like, why did that pop off? And then when you look at, there's a thread though that goes through it. You just have to follow that thread. That's the hard part. People don't know what that thread is to follow. That's what that's what I'm coming to terms with, and trying to, do my study and due diligence on all that. That's why I really appreciate your show, brother. And one last question. I don't want to take up too much, King. I know you're doing what you do. But I know you were talking about the whole melancholic thing and, about what's going on. And I'm kind of feeling that spirit in the air. I don't know if it's just the time that we in, or, if it's all of the racial things that they're trying to put out here, and, and more is just not clicking and getting it together, because even the prophet said, he said the only way you see a more do good is by the, the barrel of a gun.
That's right.
So
that's right.
That's unfortunate, but for those who are trying to, manifest and make things happen, it's hard to do it on an individual basis. That's why the temple is important. But everybody in there got to be moving and operating. So
exactly.
But if you could just let me know that book that you was just reading. I heard you was quoting. I didn't get the title. About
that
the name.
was that was called The Right to Use One's Name.
Right. Okay. Who's the author?
I don't even know.
Okay.
I got it from some old. You know how you just have mad papers? I was cleaning stuff out one day.
I've been putting Yeah, I've been putting together a library. I got a lot of articles and books I'm putting together, and I'm trying to get it up into the clouds so people can just, I don't even have to point and like, look, just go here and just study on. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, I really appreciate everything you're doing, bro. Stay up. Long to you. Peace to the family and all that, brother. Keep it up. All right.
Long to you,
King. Thank you. A little blessing, little support for you. All right.
I appreciate that, King. Thank you, man. Right. Love and light to you. Peace.
No doubt. Love and light.
Okay. 832. You want Super Heru Radio?
Hello?
832. Peace.
Hey, yo. Hey, can you hear me?
Peace. Yeah, I can. How you, brother?
Oh, hey. Hey, I'm good, fam. How you doing?
I'm good, King. What's going on?
All right, man. I want to ask you. I had a few questions, man. I don't know if you're sure about the different genealogies and things, but from Houston, Texas, that's where I'm calling from. And
Peace.
My last name is Owen. But I'm not really sure as far back as, who or where specifically I originated from, or, my lineage is from. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with the region and the people in that geographical area.
What area
that's one question
again?
I want to ask you.
What area
I'm in Houston,
again?
Texas. Houston,
okay,
Texas.
What part? I mean, like, where your family has always been from there?
Well, I mean, pretty much. I mean, for the most part, I got some family in Louisiana, Monroe, Louisiana.
Okay. Yep, that makes sense. So in Monroe, that was Blackfoot, Muskogee, Washita, Washoe. A lot of them migrated. A lot of people from Louisiana migrated to get away from the Jim Crow that was coming down after Louisiana Purchase and all of that. So a lot of them went further in and went in south of Texas. Also, a lot of them fought in the Spanish-American War in Texas too. So you probably have some Cheyenne and stuff like that in you too.
Hey, that's funny because I mean, if you see me, I can pass. Everybody say like I'm Puerto Rican or something. You know what I'm saying? I just be messing around telling people like, yeah, I'm Puerto Rican. You know what I'm saying? And then you give me a whatnot. But it's funny, you know. You know what I'm saying? It's funny though that you say that. So I always wonder because I'm like, man, it's funny you say that though, bro.
What's the last name?
My last name is Owens. Owens.
Oh,
that's from my mother's side. On my father's side, he's a Reagan.
Reagan, Reageen,
right,
or Regean.
Reagans, Reagans.
Oh yeah. So so that's that's Cheyenne and Zapata. That's also like Cheyenne, like Washoe, Cheyenne, Washita, of course, Blackfoot, which is Bakuni, Cree, Southern Cree, stuff like that.
So where can I cut you off, I'm sorry. But
now, you can
where can I go to?
You can go to this thing called the Dawes Indian Rolls, right? DAWES, Indian Rolls. And then they'll have like names and regions. You type in the region and type in your last name and see if there was anybody in them places with that name. They'll give you what so-called tribe that is. So that would then let you know that then the Moors from Monroe was the Reagan tribe, and the Reagan tribe of the clan of, let's say, Eel, and then the Owens tribe from the clan of Bay. You see what I'm saying? It went like that.
Right.
But after people stopped using they god names as they noble titles, their titles of nobility, once that fell, they had to use they they tribal names as their national names. So then Cherokee and then this like that became the name of the tribe or whatever. That's why you see so many so-called Indians with English names, because the British Empire and the Societist Empire was working together at one point over here, and they grew up under that control. So when we hear the term Native American, that actually means somebody that was under the jurisdiction, who was not from here, who was brought over here to work. So it makes sense why why black people was kicked out of the Cherokee tribes, you see what I'm saying, as Native Americans, because, you know what I'm saying, they weren't the real slaves. The real slaves were the renegade Indians, a.k.a. the escaped white people, who was the same blood as Custer and them, who was trying to kill them for breaking away and learning the ways of the forest from us.
Okay. I mean, all right. I got so many other questions, but I'm gonna narrow it down because I know time limited.
Yeah, there's another book.
Go ahead. What's the book?
Called The Forgotten Cause of the Civil War.
Forgotten of the Civil War. Okay. Forgotten of the Civil War. Okay. So, I've been listening to you for a while, man. It probably been about a good year and a half, going on maybe a good year, maybe. I've been listening to you, and I mean, before even listening to you, my mom's, which is a Owens, she always builded with us, even as from a youngin, on this type of knowledge. You know what I'm saying? And I remember she used to have books about Yakub and all that, and as a child, we didn't really understand it, but I took that. Even subconsciously without even knowing it, as I got older, I started seeing different things about it, and it was just like a light switch, like, damn, you know what I'm saying? Shit started clicking to me. I'm like, and then I'm living out in this world, and I'm seeing stuff for myself, from my own personal perspective. So it's like a lot of stuff makes sense. It's like a lot don't to me, you know what I mean? And it's like, so wait, but I just had a question I wanted to ask you about that, because I was born, in a Baptist church. My grandmother, I went to church on Sundays, sometimes Monday, Tuesday, you know what I'm saying? So, I mean, I'm well versed and based in the Bible, in the teachings of Jesus Christ. But, hearing everything that you were saying and everything about that, it's like, I want to know, like, when they referring to the God, are they referring to more, or are they speaking in an angelic or spiritual sense?
It depends in terms of the Bible.
Yes.
In terms of the Bible, that's all. One of the things I learned with the Bible is that you're supposed to read it from Revelation to Genesis, because Revelation represents the time we in now. Genesis represents the time that we going back or repatriating back to have to go through all of that. So the Quran with the Bible, you know what I'm saying, are both like the book and the pillars, you know what I'm saying, of us as the people who descended with the same bloodline as the Creator from time immemorial, or from what time is in our modern context of that. There never was a time when man, there never was a time when man was not. Because if there was, there would be a time when God was not. And that cannot be. Therefore, if man was created in the image of God, therefore man is God incarnate, or man is subject of God, or the subject of God, meaning that he is God incarnate when he is in his right mind and is giving glory to his Creator, which is the arm, leg, arm, head. The true and living Christ, which is divine nature of man, that exists with no eanity, which is a word that means lack of substance. So when you put Christ, the divine nature of man, followed by eanity, lack of substance, you see why so many Christians have fallen, because what they have not chosen to acknowledge, which is the glaring, obvious truth, which was the fact that he was not a Christian. So
Right,
make something
and
out
I say
of
that all the time
name.
when I meet people. They sometimes get offended by that. They like, I kind of drop some jewels on them about some certain things, and not to be a prick about it or anything, but to just kind of inform them, because I feel like.
But that's how you know that
you
are him. That's how you know that you are descended from him, because you are doing exactly what he did at the time that he was there. He was the first Moor in modern times to declare his nationality to the Rome, and they was cool with it. The people who hated on him was the Sadducees and the Pharisees, the amalgamated class of bourgeoisie, moriscos, who didn't want the kingdom of God brought forth in terms of the true nationality back to the people. So they used him as the sacrifice, and then we became, who were the descendants, the Holy Grail, were then transported into a specific time sphere where we would embody and live the same circumstance. We'd be born in the ghetto. We'd be born in the manger, which is the ghetto, right, which is the beast where the animals is at. Then we was brought by the three kings, right? That's the pineal gland, the pituitary, and the hypothalamus. Then that's the wise men from the east that then came to the Christ child that was born of a single mother. That's us, right? Then we either got a step pops, right, or uncle, right? So that's the Christ thing and the Yaakov thing. And then we then have to go from Bethlehem to Galilee to avoid the census, right? That's the false jurisdiction being imposed on us by the state government. You see what I'm saying? It's the same thing. Yep. We're in the same time period because the same fiction is rooted itself in the minds of the people. So until they know who and what they really are, you got to know and put yourself in the means so that way when it go down, like the Bible say, you are walking in the middle of between the calamity and the trench on either side, and the Creator bring you right through.
You know I feel that. I respect that, bro. I don't want to take up too much of your time because I know a lot of people want to get at you, fam. But I just want to say, man, I never met you, man. I love you like a brother, man. I love everything you're doing, you and your wife, man. And more power, man. And I really mean that. Hey, I really want to get nationalized soon, man, and I really want to, become fully, in this thing, man. I want to leave you with this, like, man. I mean, even if we do this thing, you know what I'm saying, as we are now, we still trying to move in. It feel like the devil still got his foot on our neck. So I feel like, and I can even hang up this and you can just conversate, but I feel like, what next? You know what I'm saying? Like, we still got to run to this nigga for everything. You know what I mean? We still got to go to this nigga to get the money. We still got to, you know what I'm saying? And so I feel like, damn, we the almighty and all-powerful, so why we still subject or seeming inferior to, you know what I'm saying?
Because a nation divided against itself, amongst itself cannot stand. We are still divided based on exactly what happened in 1774. And niggas don't want to accept it. They want to say it's everything else. They want to call you everything else in the world but what you really are. And that's the problem. Until niggas really want to really settle that out, people are going to be worrying about whether or not they Moors or Africans or this or that. You can do whatever you want to do. All I know is that all the research in my 40 years on this planet, the shit has shown me that this is the shit that is what it was supposed to be, because he's the only one that left something for everybody. And all niggas had to do was believe in a creator and believe that they were something more than a nigga. So until somebody else showed me something better, I'm rolling with this. So I just can't roll with the foolishness, which is all of the extra stuff. But all of that comes in when you inject people who are not solely this. There's nothing wrong with being yourself. And once you are yourself, you can then commune with everybody else in equality. So thank you, my brother, and inshallah we'll speak again soon.
All right, fam, please.
Uh, 662 on Super Heru Radio.
Hello, Heru. How you doing?
Peace, Queen. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I guess you just about answered my question in your last statement that you made. Well, me and my sister had we both having a conversation. Her and my uncle had traced our ancestors all the way back to the Porch Creek tribe, And
that's right.
She was saying that we need to get the DNA tested to prove that we are Poetry Creek. And I was saying, well, maybe we just declare ourselves a Moorish citizen, and then that'll just cover it all.
That's right.
So,
that's right. You just declare yourself that, put that nationality in your paperwork, and then they will have to prove that you're not that.
Yes.
See, when you go to get it, sometimes they can construe it like you didn't believe that you was that. So if you do it and you list it, and then they try to say, oh, well, you're not this and that, then that's when you flip it on them and say, okay, well, if you want to pay for a DNA test, we can do that too. You see what I'm saying? You always give them the setup. So, like you said, you could do just that. Just list that in your paperwork, and any evidence of that you have, you ain't lying. So is the truth. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm starting to really go back to like the gut, all this computer stuff and phones and Twitter and all that. I'm starting to really try to like go back to the basics, like remembering phone numbers again and trusting intuition. You know what I mean? Trusting my gut. You know what I mean? As opposed to, because sometimes you just gotta throw your hands up and say, well, this the only thing I could do.
Yes. Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to get back moving.
Peace.
Bye-bye.
510, you're on Super Radio.
Peace, brother.
Peace, King.
I would like to just say one thing. I had a severe back problem for many years, and I want to thank you and your wife for making the Black Mamba workout, because I don't have it anymore. It took me 30 days.
Wow.
And your wife, she's doing stretching to the side and stuff. And I was like,
yes,
man,
sir.
I want to thank you and your wife so much. That's all I got to say, brother.
King.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you, King. Thank you. That's really peace. Because the Queen worked very, very hard in that. The system is actually, it seems similar to others, but it's really not when you really get into it. That's why she calls it melanin active. Okay, let's see. 413, you want to go radio?
Oh. We're off the damn door, but why is y'all in the door, though?
He was right here.
I hit it back. That's how it be, man. Let's see. 914, you on Super Radio?
Peace, can you hear me?
Peace.
This is the
Peace,
postman.
Lord, how you doing?
For the Moorish Nation. Peace, what's going on?
I'm good, Lord. How you doing?
Oh, man, just navigating El Sanguine, Al Marat. I had one or two quick questions. One of the questions was when for lack of better terms, a person who declared their name, nationality, birthright, or at least corrected the name on their birth certificate, having a free national name with a title of nobility, according to the Constitution, that excludes them from being, handled like a citizen or a sub-citizen.
That's right. It automatically excludes you from being a United States citizen, yes. But Moors don't have they don't have their title on their name.
Right.
You know what I mean? Moors don't have that on their birth certificate.
Right, but let's say they have it on their birth certificate, but they didn't, get their declarations or get their ethnic classification all squared away just yet, and they have they got an upcoming court situation, right? What laws would govern how to deal with that particular individual that at least has, the name on their birth certificate? What laws do govern that particular individual? Or are they already covered by everything else, even though their paperwork is like forthcoming?
They would be in a position where they could stand on the grounds that they are not a party or parcel to the United States corporation or fiction, due to the fact that by the title of nobility, Bay and Eel, that was acknowledged by them under House Joint Resolution 75, that excludes them from being, that acknowledges the fact that they have the right to these usages. These usages, these Islamic names or customs have always been a part of our showing that we are part of a Islamic family, or what's called a Waqf trust, WAQF trust. So that automatically excludes us from being a part of the United States. So if you don't have jurisdiction over somebody, you would have to prove that, they would have to prove that you are not that. They would have to prove jurisdiction over before they could start. If they're starting without that, then that means that that's probably not a real court. That's probably, is it a state court or a federal court?
Federal court.
It's a federal court. Okay, so then that's different. So then now they are now trained to deal with international affairs or whatever. But if it's a federal court in terms of something adjudicating against or to the United States corporation, they still have no jurisdiction over a foreign national who has declared himself outside of their jurisdiction. Are they trying to do something with a child, or is it something against you, the individual?
Against the individual.
Mm-hmm.
And
okay,
I mean,
so
like
then,
you stated earlier, that people, especially brown folks, they run from their own nationality and they rather be, everything else. But when it's time to interface with the federal, state, or county level and its agents, and they have pressure and swords at their back, then at the last minute, just maybe, they may consider declaring their nationality once the swords and the pirate, cannons and cannon laws are at their back and at their head, telling them to walk the plank. So, I just wanted to put that out there because, people cling to what's comfortable, but now what was comfortable for so long is now becoming uncomfortable because it's open season on property, a.k.a. black people or ABCs or whatever you want to call it.
NBC.
If, people don't see it, but it's okay. I personally feel that brown folks need chastisement. They need a group of beings putting matchsticks in their toes to get them on their toes. You know what I'm saying? You look at the Hasidics, you look at the Chinese and the Japanese, their agent or agent C that was putting matchsticks in those groups of people's toes. You had Hitler, you had the United States government, you had the bombing of China, the bombing of Japan, and they decided to, get fortified and be like, it'll never happen again. Now, if you go back to when we had our chastisement period, the harsh one, I think that probably, unfortunately, that may be what is needed in order to chase people back into moral science. Because
that's what I'm saying, the white blood cells, man. That's what they are. They're white blood cells. They're trying to get rid of all what they believe is the trash. The same Negroes that they've been miseducating for all these years is the same ones they're now trying to get rid of, because they can't have a world where everybody, as much as they want a drone world with all of the spectrum world, all the stuff they're doing, remember, it's always the opposite with these people. If that's what half of their agenda is, the other half of the agenda is the opposite of that. Because it's not about controlling everything. It's about getting everything and reducing it to rubble and then building up from that. That's the goal. The goal is to get everything reduced to nothing. All points to equal, then they can start at one.
Could you clarify for those out there and it goes a little deeper into what we were just saying a moment ago, how can someone declare that they are a Moor and be a United States citizen of the U.S.A. or United States government or whatever? How can you be a citizen of the USA or United States and be a Moor at the same time? Is that possible versus being a national?
The only way that can happen is if you declare where you're domiciled, because the Declaration of Domicile says that you're there by your own opinion and that you've chosen to have a home there. It just so happens that your home is a part of the vast estate trust that you happen to be a part of through the divine and national movement as a Moor. Also as a Moor or a Muslim or a Mohammedan or a Moslem, Moslem. It says in Article 13, if any citizen of the United States shall accept, claim, receive, or retain any title of nobility or honor, or shall have without the consent of Congress accept and retain any present pension, office, emolument of any kind whatever from any emperor, king, prince, or foreign power, such person shall cease to be a citizen of the United States and shall be incapable of holding any office of trust or profit under them or either of them. So what this also says is that citizens of the United States have no honor because it said, if any citizen of the United States shall accept, claim, receive, or retain any title of nobility or honor or shall. So that means that citizens of the United States cannot be noble. They cannot have honor, you see, just by consent, just by that being said, without consent of Congress. We have consent of Congress through HJR 75 because they had to do that because they declared their bankruptcy on May 1st. By May 4th, they declared HJR 75 based upon what the Prophet put down in 1928. Therefore, when you today declare that you are part of a Moorish Science Temple, Moorish Nation, and then you have adequate verification of that, right, and have evidence of the fact that you are who you say you are and all your ID match up, then if they're still dealing with you like that, they are either trying to force some sort of contract on you or they want to somehow get you to capitulate whatever charge they have created. You see what I'm saying? So if the charge is whatever, another way to deal with that would be through the executive office of your estate, by saying then that as the occupant of the office of the estate of this person that you have called the plaintiff, it is not in the best interest of the estate that you try to do this, because this would basically result in trying to get the noble to abandon his estate, and that cannot happen because this estate is protected in ecclesiastical law in heaven, and on earth is protected by a vast estate trust that is connected to the original Moorish divine and national movement, that is an organ and vehicle to get back to the Almoroccan Empire and the Societas Republicae Americanas Estados. Therefore,
you say that,
as an emissary, go ahead.
I'm just saying, you say that so swift. I can't say it as swift as you.
That's why we get the what you call it, man. You just play it back.
Okay. No
archives and shit.
Okay. So let's say the declarations and all documents are now in place, and that particular individual is navigating and interfacing with the county, state, and federal and international level.
That's great.
You are not able to operate with full faith and credit, being that even the judges don't have honor because they are a citizen and have a title of nobility?
See, that's the thing. If they have a title of nobility, like a judge or esquire or some sort of chancery agent, then that means that they really can't be practicing law anyway. They can't be doing that anyway over you, especially if it's a federal situation, because now they have to do that in their own name. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is all about who owns the name.
All right. Well, thank you. Peace to the family as always. I'll be in touch.
Indeed.
And hug up all the family. One love.
Indeed. Love and light, King. Peace. .414, you're on Super Heru Radio. 414 on Super Heru Radio. (919) on Super Heru Radio.
Yo, can you hear me?
Peace.
Yo, peace, Aseer. How you doing?
I'm good, King. How you doing?
Doing good. Thanks for taking my call. I just had like a kind of a comment, I guess. I recently started reading a book called. I think it's called just The Barbary Coast. I believe it has another title with it, but it's something The Barbary Coast. And I'm like 11 pages. I'm like 11 pages in, and I'm reading it, and I'm like, yo, Aseer has mentioned all the things. So it mentions the Maghreb and how Maghreb is like all of Northwest Africa is the Maghreb.
Right, which is over here.
Right, exactly.
Which is over here.
It also talks about I heard you mention we when we were in the past, I guess, and even now when we were dealing with the so-called European, we had two different names. Like we used our not even a Christian name, but almost like we really did use a name that they could pronounce, right? A free national name. A name they could pronounce, and then we had our Islamic name, like it mentions Barbosa, but then it says his Islamic name. I can't remember his Islamic name. I turned the page down and highlighted and everything. But it says Barbosa is his Christian name or whatever. And then he has an Islamic name. Also, they mentioned like Henry the Fifth, I think, or something like that. It's one of the
navigator.
Kings,
the navigator for Portugal.
Okay. So there's there's the European royalty within our history, but the same people, even the European, they use different names depending on where they are. Because I wish I had the book with me. I'm navigating right now, but it's like in Ireland and Scotland, he's like King George or something, and then in Spain and Portugal and stuff like that, he'll be like a whole nother name, but it's the same person. I wish I had a book. I can't remember, but
when you talk about Moorally Suleiman in the European court was named Louis XVI. Then you had what's his name, Charles V in the European court, but then in the court of Montezuma, when they married into the royal family over here, his name was Carlos Quint or Carlos Quinto. So again, the same way you be known as Junebug when you was a kid, and then, Peanut later, and then your real name, and then a derivative of that later. This is what Moors was doing. But the problem, only difference is, after a point over here, they started to use these vulgar words that they had got used to using and use them as a species of property through equity. And that's what dudes got us jammed up.
It's not to say that what you're saying is not valid by itself, but it's just like I was reading it, and I'm like, yo, Aseer has said all of these things that this book said. I don't know if that's just been the story or if that's stuff that information that you investigated, but it's just the truth, man. It's just, and it just is all hitting home. So I don't know. I'm your friend on Facebook. I'm gonna try to take a picture and tag you in the picture so you can see the title of the book.
Please do.
So you can add it to your library. But yes. Thank you for all the information you put it out there, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, fam. Thank you for the validation that is out there. Thank you.
That's all I wanted to say. I'm probably calling. If you do the show next week, I'm gonna call in next week and probably try to give more information as to what I'm saying, because I don't have the book in front of me right now.
It's all good. We'll be here. Love and light to you, brother. Peace. Yeah, man. Here we go. No. 562. You on Super Heru Radio? Peace.
Peace.
Peace, Queen. How you doing?
Peace, King. How you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
Oh, wow. Just, still piecing it all together. I know, it's a lot of work, how intense it is, how we have to, dig up all the information that's been hidden from us. So
exactly.
Even being in the temples, so much information is being hidden from us. So we got to really, just dig it up ourselves, really.
That's right. That's right.
So, yeah, I just wanted to ask you about, us as Moors and how we are connected to this general federal bank that you had mentioned, in terms of like a reserve that was set aside for us to claim our estate. Because you said, like, I understand, like, the birth certificate is evidence of our estate, and so most of us don't even realize that we have a estate, and they even mentioned it on this movie called Jamie Foxx. What is that movie called? He was playing a homeless man. He was playing a homeless man, and basically
the thing with him and Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah, he was a really skilled musician, and the man brought him off the streets, and he mentioned to him, because, he said, well, you can sign these papers, and if you sign these papers, so-and-so can look over your estate, and so most of us don't even realize that we have an estate, so for it to come out, little glitches of information hidden, because we don't, none of us, I'm just now realizing that I have an estate that we're born, that we're all born with. So I'm just trying to figure out, you had said the General Reserve Federal Bank. The General Federal Bank was set up, I guess, in connection to our estate.
Well, in 28, after the Prophet received the vast estate trust from the Saudi, from the Sultan, he then came back to Chicago and filed it as a vast estate trust for the members of his family. That family happened to also be Moors and be connected to the Moroccan Empire. Therefore, the Moorish Temple was to be the vehicle to reestablish themselves as that. Once this was established, the so-called United States had to find another source of income. This is why eventually they had to get rid of prohibition, because they had no internal income, because all the money was coming through people like Meyer Lansky and Al Capone and Lucky Luciano and what's his name, the Jew, Meyer Lansky and them. So the Prophet and them estate was then set aside, and then by 33, when they went bankrupt, that portion that was connected to that vast estate that was filed in Chicago, that Federal Reserve Bank had to be set aside. That was the bank, like I said, the Fed in Chicago. That's why everybody that comes out of Chicago goes to such high office, because they're using the negative side of the estate to come up, meaning that whoever is the governor or senator or representative of Chicago has the right to use the people's name to do whatever business on behalf of the state. That estate, or those estates of these undeclared Moors who still have these estates, once they get locked up or killed or whatever, that gets retroactively put to whoever's the next in kin. But if that next in kin is under the jurisdiction of the United States, then that's just another estate they get to go through in probate. You see what I'm saying? So once one declares one nationality and then one does things in a certain manner, you have adequate representation to be able to access that through the proper channels to be able to enhance your personal estate on behalf of the vast estate, which is all an ecclesiastical trust governed by an ecclesiastical government, which is the Moorish Temple of America, in the name of the Prophet Noble Jew Ali, who is not only prophet but is also emperor, therefore us being subjects of being him in name. Therefore, we can use his name, like I said, through ecclesiastical trust law to be able to protect whatever properties and living contents and not be impugned for that, because everything we are doing is to show that we are not under the jurisdiction of the United States. So when the United States continues to contract with you in those instances, it's usually because there's something that wasn't done or was done incorrectly in the past that they know that you haven't figured out. So they're using that as a loophole to keep whatever business they have with you going.
Okay, so are there sources of information where we can just read about that whole history point on the General Federal Bank?
That aspect of it, like I said, is one of the things that they don't talk about. You hear about it in, this is the basis of the whole Patriot Sovereignty UCC stuff. This is, when you read about that, you're basically reading about people finding ways to use their name to get into their estate trust through a commercial end instead of an ecclesiastical end, which is why a lot of people who do that go to jail. Because you as a Moor are supposed to do things in a more divine and national manner. Therefore, if you are coming from a concept where spirituality is based on your commercial value, you are a European. Therefore, you are not of your original character. Therefore, they don't have to deal with you. And they can use you to break other people. But if you come in your original character with your estate intact to show you're executor of that, now you can make them trustees, and by law they are now liable. Because they are foreign agents anyway. If they all have attorneys, esquire, and this at the end of their name, they all foreign agents. So how are foreign agents occupying a jurisdiction over a natural-born subject of a foreign power? You can't do that. The only way you could do that is through commercial means. And if you're not dealing with them in commercial means, if you've exiled yourself to the Muslim temple or the religion of Al-Islam, then that means everything that you own and are is property of the Most High. Therefore, you can own everything. You can control everything and own nothing. Therefore, even your name is now exemplified in the ecclesiastical district, which then means you don't own nothing. So I could have a Rolls Royce and all of that in my name, but my name, this is for God. This is how the Christians do it, right? Don't they do it like that? They make millions of dollars off of staying within that Christian jurisdiction, but that makes them Europeans. That makes them foreigners to you and me, who have abandoned their estates and have enslaved their own people to a false doctrine. So we have to be better than that. So, like I said, man, it's just about, getting things correct so they can be done.
Yeah, it makes so much more sense, when you approach it from, it's the source of it is from the spiritual source, and that does make a lot more sense. Because I was protected in my car, tell other people that I was protected when I put my license plate when I registered my license plate in the name of the Moorish Science Temple. Because they towed my car, and then it was really actually easy to get it out, because it was in the name, it was registered under the Moorish Science Temple. So that's right. That's just one example that I actually experienced.
Right, but and then you were empowered as an emissary to get it.
Huh? What did you say? I
said exactly. I'm sorry, Queen, but we got to go to a last call. We're running out of time.
Okay, well, I'll just catch up with you then.
All right.
Okay.
All right, Queen. Peace.
Okay, peace.
Uh, 413 on Super Heru Radio. Peace. On Super Heru Radio. Okay. Five 6-2, you on Super Heru Radio. Yeah. I guess that's it. Try one more. 914, you're on Superhero Radio. Getting things correct. Please.
Yeah, that makes so much more sense. When you approach it from, the source of it.
Okay. Well, like I said, as you wind it down, it just boils down to what we've been saying. There is a way to deal with things. It's just that reconsolidating government and understanding what the title of nobility really is, and the fact that you've always had it, and that based on a lot of research I'm doing, we've never really not had nationality. We've just kind of misplaced it over the years. Like right now I'm looking at a page where it says the following states or territories have published the title of nobility amendment in their official publication as ratified amendment to the Constitution of the United States. Colorado, Connecticut, Florida, Georgia, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Maine, Massachusetts, Michigan, Missouri, Nebraska, the Northwestern Territories, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Virginia, Wisconsin, Wyoming. So that means all of these states have on their books that they don't have jurisdiction and can't do business with anybody with a title of nobility. So once they see an ill or a bay at the end of your name, and so long you ain't got a bloody knife or smoking gun in your hand, they really shouldn't be messing with you. They really shouldn't be talking with you or anything. Once they identify who you are, they're supposed to let you keep it moving the same way they do with any white man, because that's essentially what you become. But God forbid the white man be a black man, because then that means the white man ain't really the white man. The white man is actually the black man, and the black man is actually the white man. And so forth and so on. And it creates this hustle of who and what the person is supposed to be, when really you are what you've always been, a being created in the image of the Most High, man. But once you get on Earth, right? Earth, EARF, get on Earth, it gets complicated because you got all these other people. But there were things that our ancestors put in play and demons that our ancestors conjured up to keep the weak in us from not gaining access to the kingdom today. That's how much they cared about their situation. So when you ask why the devil was created, you always got to know that Y equals self. To get rid of the devil in yourself, to know what you're not. But the house of Beit El, or the house of Beit El, the house of God, which is the ancient place or the seat of worship of Ephraim, which was on the border of Ben-Hameen, which is Benjamin, identified as the city of Luz. Luz, spelled backwards, was also Zul. Zul was the name of Robert Zemeckis' character in Ghostbusters 1, who was the gatekeeper, who was the key master, who had to open up the portal of the ancient Sumerian god, thereby bringing Beit El, or the house of Zul, or the house of Luz, back to reality. You see what I'm saying? But that, I digress. That's from Samuel 1:13-2. So in all of these, in Arabic, it says al-bayat, or al-bayat, or al-el-bayat, which is in Arabic a phrase meaning literally the people of the house, or the family of the house, which is the al-bayat, the als and the bays, was used in Arabia before the advent of Islam. So when I told you that the religion of Islam was created in 836 A.D. and flourished to the year 1196 A.D., which was approximately 1416 to 1776, if you look within those years, that was when the Ottomans, the Osmanli Beys, took over the Eastern Roman Empire, took it from the Abyssinians or the Abbasid Caliphate, or on behalf of them, which at that time was going from the secret caliph at Baghdad to the old man in the mountain in Syria, which is where we get the movie about the Hashemites, or the video game about the Hashemites that we call the Assassins, or the Assassin's Creed today. Again, all about us, all about the house of El and Bay, or the house of Al-Bayat, which was used before the advent of Islam to refer to one's clan, or would be adopted by the ruling family of a tribe. So my father, who was of the Rogers clan, and my mother, who was of the Wilson clan, was either from the Wilson tribe, and the Rogers tribe was either from the Eel or the Bay ancestrally, whether they knew it or not. So, and now in me being an Eel, I also married an Eel. You know what I'm saying? But even in my own name, born name, Prince Charles Edward LeBrie Rogers, that's Eel in the middle. That's E-L. Right? And even in Charles is E-L. So it's all of this. Same thing like Selena. C-E-L. Her middle name is Miguel. So she got all these L's. We got all these L's or Eels. We got all these bays. Right? In the Quran it says, verily Allah has decreed to purify you, O Alu Bayet, Alu al-Bayet, to sanctify you in the perfect way. The Surah of Aziyah, which was the Quran 33, verse 33. Come on, man. So in that, the holy family of the Prophet, who the rightful heir of the Prophet was who? Ali, right? The Prophet's name was Ali, Noble Ali, brought forth the Eels and the Bays, the house of Bayet Eel of Luz on earth. Zul, the key masters. The Vatican used the symbol of the keys as the means of control of us. Yeah. Even her sister, her father's name is Danielle. Her all of these eels is what I'm seeing all around me and all around us. This Moorish culture thing is so deep in us that we've missed it. So anybody that wants to holler at us about the consecration and get applications for the temple that we're consecrating out here to be within the ecclesiastical jurisdiction, email us at houseofl@hotmail.com. You could also email, check out www. You could email me, and then we'll build on all of that. There's also another email called We Are Moorish Science Temple at gmail.com, and we can build on getting your proclamations formally put out properly. Also, you can check out www.aseertheducateers.com for a lot of the other materials, as well as the Melanin Active Yoga DVD. Most of my new stuff is all basically done on a private basis in terms of workshops, classes, and individuals. But I have over 40 months, and about 40 months of material in terms of that we can build on, and all of that. Classes 2 hours each that build specifically on deeper aspects of what we've been talking about tonight. You could also check out www.cookingmorewithless.com and www.sagasad.com. And inshallah, we'll be able to build with you again next week. Hit me up again at houseofl@hotmail.com for lectures, book signings. Also check out www.darkskull418.com for the world's most dangerous comic book novel. And look for the comic book adaptation to come soon. And we'll see you sooner than later. All human families of the planet Earth, especially the bays and the eels, love and light. Inshallah, we'll see you again. Peace.